Welcome to the deep dive. We are so glad you're here with us today. Our mission for this one is to really demystify the modern path to U.S. citizenship.
Yeah, which is no small task right now.
No, not at all. We're going to be pulling from excerpts of The American Journey, naturalization standards, and evolving security protocols. And, we really have to talk about this because sitting here in March 2026, the whole landscape of naturalization has it's undergone massive, truly unprecedented shifts over the past few months.
Unprecedented is the right word. It's really a totally new era.
Right. Okay, let's unpack this because, millions of people apply each year. You're seeking rights like voting, getting a U.S. passport, just having that permanent security. But this journey is way more complex than just filling out a form.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's a rigorous test of endurance.
Yeah.
It really is. And it's heavily impacted by, constantly changing national security priorities. I think people assume it's just administrative, like getting a driver's license.
Right, yeah.
But it's not. It's a microscopic examination of your entire life.
Which brings us to the very first step, because before we can even get into the really shocking disruptions that have been happening at the end of the process recently, we have to understand the grueling baseline requirements just to get a seat at the table.
Yeah, just to get your foot in the door.
Exactly. I kind of think of the eligibility phase trying to qualify for a marathon where just proving you're allowed to run takes years of your life.
That's a great analogy. It really is a marathon just to reach the starting line.
Right. So the basics for those of you listening, you generally have to be a lawful permanent resident. So meaning you've got a green card for at least 5 years or 3 years if you're married to a U.S. citizen. And you can't just have the card, right? You have to show continuous physical presence.
Yeah, that's a huge hurdle for some. You have to actually be living in the U.S.
Right, paying taxes, building a life, and then, you submit the Form N-400, you pay the $725 fee, which is obviously subject to change. But I want to push back on one thing here in the baseline requirements.
Sure.
The application says you have to demonstrate good moral character.
Yes.
Which, that sounds incredibly subjective, right? How does this massive, faceless government bureaucracy measure a person's soul?
I know, it sounds like a philosophical judgment. But in immigration law, it's actually deeply mechanical. It's less about your soul and more about, background vetting.
Okay, so what does that actually look like?
So when you file, you have to go to a biometrics appointment. They take your fingerprints, your photos, and they run all of that through the FBI and other intelligence databases.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. So moral character is really tied to concrete things. Do you have a serious criminal history? Do you have major tax issues? Have you lied on previous immigration forms? It's a negative definition, essentially.
Meaning as long as you haven't done these specific bad things, you're considered to have good moral character.
Exactly. And, if we connect this to the bigger picture, this initial vetting phase alone can plunge applicants into this crazy 6 to 18-month waiting period.
But just to hear back.
Just to hear back. And that's if there aren't massive backlogs, which there often are. So you're waiting a year, maybe more, just to get to the interview stage.
Which sets the stage for a really high-stakes interview. So picture this. An applicant waits over a year, they pass all those intense FBI background checks, and they finally get called in for their interview.
Right.
But if they filed recently, they're suddenly facing a brand new, much steeper hurdle at this exact stage. Here's where it gets really interesting.
Yes, the 2025 civics test.
Yes. Let's break this down for you guys. So for applications filed on or after October 20th, 2025, there is a new test. And the leap in difficulty it's massive.
It really is a completely different beast compared to the old one.
It is. Under the old system, the 2008 version, there were 100 possible questions to study. And the officer would ask you 10, and you only needed to get 6 right.
A simple 60% passing grade on a short quiz.
Right. But the new 2025 test expanded that study bank to 128 questions. And instead of 10 questions, they sit there and ask you 20. And you have to get 12 right to hit that same 60% threshold.
And remember, this is an oral exam. You're sitting across from an armed federal officer, often doing this in your second or third language.
Exactly. It's like the government abruptly changing the syllabus right before final exams. Why make it so much harder so suddenly? And what happens to, older applicants? I imagine an expanded English oral exam is just a brick wall for someone who's, say, 75 years old.
It would be. But there is a carve-out. It's called the 65-20 rule.
Okay, what's that?
So if an applicant is 65 or older and they've been a resident for 20 years or more, they get an exception. They only have to study a specific list of 20 marked questions. The officer asks them 10, they need 6 to pass, and crucially, they can take it in their native language.
Oh, okay, that makes a lot of sense. That's a good safety valve.
Yeah, it's essential. But to your question about why the test changed for everyone else,
Hmm.
if we look at it impartially, it stems from recent executive actions that really emphasize citizenship as a privilege.
Okay.
The stated goal from the administration is that they want to ensure applicants have a much deeper, more robust understanding of American values and history. They don't want it to be a rubber stamp.
So it's about proving integration.
Exactly. But it does create this really stark dividing line in the applicant pool. If you filed in September 2025, you take the easy test. If you filed in November, you take the hard one.
Wow. Just luck of the draw, basically.
Pretty much.
Okay, so let's say our applicant navigates all of that. They study the 128 questions, they sit in that room, they ace the harder 2025 test, they pass the English proficiency part, the officer approves them.
Best day of their life, right?
Right. You'd think all that's left is the finish line, the oath of allegiance ceremony. But recently, for a specific group of people, that finish line has been abruptly pulled away.
And this is the most jarring part of the modern process.
It's genuinely shocking. Like, in December 2025, we started seeing these reports of approved applicants being pulled out of lines and escorted away from their naturalization ceremony.
It was unbelievable scenes.
Right. Let's give you guys some specific examples from the sources. In Boston, at the historic Faneuil Hall, long-term residents from Haiti were physically removed from the ceremony. In Indianapolis, out of 100 prospective citizens waiting to take the oath, 38 were denied entry at the door.
38 out of 100, let that sink in.
Yeah, nearly 40% of the room. And there were similar, sudden cancellations in Atlanta, too. How on earth is this happening to people who are already approved?
Well, what's fascinating here is the legal loophole that allows this to happen.
Hmm.
Most people don't realize that you are not a citizen until you actually recite the oath of allegiance out loud.
Wait, so the approval at the interview doesn't make you a citizen?
Nope. You are legally still just a permanent resident right up until the second you speak those words. And because of new late 2025 policy, holds specifically a memo known as PM 6020192.
PM 6020192.
Got it. Right. That memo targets nationals from so-called high-risk countries. So we're talking about places like Iran, Haiti, Afghanistan, and Venezuela. And it empowers officers to cancel these ceremonies on the spot based on national security directives.
Even after years of thorough background checks.
Even after everything. The FBI checks, the 128-question test, the approval, they can halt it at the door.
That is just, it's a deeply contentious issue. And, we really want to make sure we're presenting both sides of this fairly to you all listening because it is so polarized right now.
It absolutely is.
Right. So on one side, you have advocates and civil rights groups who describe this as unspeakable cruelty. I mean, they're currently pushing for something called the Naturalization and Oath Ceremony Protection Act to stop this from happening. Their argument is basically, you've fully vetted these people, you've taken their money, you've approved them, and now you're pulling the rug out at a public celebration just because of where they were born.
Right. It feels like a betrayal of the process to them.
Exactly. But then on the other side, USCIS and the government explicitly frame these pauses as strictly necessary for national security.
Yes. Their argument is that citizenship is irrevocable. Once you say that oath, you cannot easily be deported. You have the ultimate protections of the state.
Right.
So if a new intelligence memo drops, saying there's an elevated risk from a certain region, even if it's the morning of the ceremony, the government argues they have a duty to hit pause. They're saying we can't afford to take the risk, regardless of the emotional toll it takes on the applicant.
And we aren't here to tell you which side is right. We're not endorsing either view. But the reality on the ground is that it leaves the applicant in this bizarre legal limbo.
It really does. Because their application isn't denied.
Right, they aren't rejected.
They're just stuck.
Yeah.
They're placed on an indefinite hold. They can't move forward. But they haven't been kicked out of this system either.
So what does this all mean? If we zoom out, the modern path to citizenship for you or anyone you know going through this is a profound commitment. You have to navigate the $725 fees, that huge expanded 128-question test, and now a highly unpredictable final ceremony where you could be turned away at the door.
Yeah, the rules of the game have fundamentally changed.
They really have, which is why checking uscis.gov and consulting with an immigration attorney is just more crucial now than it ever has been. You cannot navigate this alone anymore.
Definitely not. And I'd actually like to leave the listeners with a final thought to mull over regarding the people caught in these recent ceremony holds.
Yeah, please do.
Think about the twilight zone these applicants are in. They've been entirely vetted, they've been tested, they have been legally evaluated and officially approved as having good moral character by the United States government. Yet they're locked out of citizenship at the very last second without actually being rejected. So you have to ask yourself, what does it mean for a system to deem someone perfectly qualified to join the country, but simultaneously too risky to let them take the oath?
Wow.
It fundamentally changes the definition of what it means to be approved in America today.
It really does. I mean, doing everything right and still not knowing if you'll actually cross the finish line, that's a lot to think about. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.